Welcome to the WCIA 3-in-1 podcast. Bret Beherns here in the studio once again with Marlee, Wierda, and Craig Choate, both reporting from home. Guys, how we doing? I feel like we've kind of settled into this new normal now of working from home, although I have not been at home. I've been here in the studio pretty much the whole time. So are you guys adjusting now? Do you feel like this is just kind of a new normal? I think it's going to change a lot. And for me, I think, Craig, you would probably agree with this. The last couple of years we've been working together. It's been more than a couple now. Heck, time flies, doesn't it? But, you know, we always put a premium on production value and wanting things to look and sound the best. And I think that's going to continue whenever we can get it. But if there's an instance where, you know, we talk to Nick Allegretti like we did, or you talk to Ted Karras, or, you know, some other people that distance keeps us away, why not do a Zoom interview? Why not get that face in there? And for the teleconferences, like with Brad Underwood, and we're going to chat about that. He talked to the media on Thursday. All three of us in the department were a part of that. Why not do that? Let's see the face. I think it's just more personal anyway. So I think there's going to be some big changes, you know, just in the media terms after that. And, you know, for me, I'm kind of a media nerd anyway. You know, I think it's going to certainly be different. But we'll see. That's all yet to come, and we're still, quote unquote, in the middle of this new normal and this pandemic of coronavirus and COVID-19. All right, a lot coming up here on the WCIA 3-in-1 podcast. I want to talk about Adam Miller. I want to talk about Brad Underwood and his remarks. Just an update on the program. Chatted with him for about 50 minutes on Thursday. Let's talk about the IHSA as well, coming out this week and saying that the state tournaments are canceled. And at this point, the seasons are all over. We can chat about whether the IHSA is still holding out hope and thinking that, hey, maybe they can play a couple of games. We'll see. And then also our thoughts on the NFL draft. And let's just briefly touch on that first. Marlee, how you feeling last night about the Dolphins pick and where they go? Had a couple of picks in the first round. And the local connection, Craig, is that Ted Karras is going to be snapping the ball to Tua. There's always seems to be a local connection there back to Illinois or Central Illinois in some way. What'd you make of Tua Tagovailoa going to Miami? Yeah, I think he's. Is down in Miami too. That's another, I guess, Illinois guy. I almost forgot about him since I feel like it's been so long since we've touched on, I guess, Illinois football. But I guess a lot of connections we got down in Florida. Yeah, that's true. And you're our biggest connection to that. So you know, it's. How's the weather down there right now? I'm guessing it's decent. You know. now you're in Champaign, from the swamp to upstate New York to Illinois. It's a great trajectory. I don't know if it's improving there at all, but it's all good. It's on this crazy thing called life where it takes us. All right, let's jump into Adam Miller here. And look, I did not know when or if he was going to sign a national letter of intent, and he does that on Wednesday, a week after the signing period opens. And after all this silence, guys, he just comes out and says, hey, I'm signing at 3:15 today, and it's just as simple as that. Craig, were you surprised that he did sign, and then were you surprised that it was with Illinois? Marlee, he said there was outside factors in that. What did you make of that comment? And I guess it goes to show that recruiting is so fluid, it never truly ends. And also, to your point in your question to Brad Underwood, you asked him specifically, were you pushing for Adam to sign? And did you ever have any doubts that he would sign with Illinois? Yeah, and he wanted the fanfare, and that's fine. You got to give the kid this moment, and that's great. I'm happy that he did have that moment, even though it was a little bit weird, and it was a first for me. Seems like a lot of firsts in this business are on recruiting stories because they're just so fluid. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, and there's always twists and turns, it seems like, with Illinois, especially at the last moment, dating back to Cliff Alexander. I'd only been working here a couple of months, and really got a firsthand experience into how this recruiting thing works at a high major level with Cliff Alexander when he picked up the Illinois hat, then set it down and put the Kansas hat on. And it seemed like Illinois Nation just flipped out on Twitter that day. That's going to be something I'll never forget in my career. But, Illinois, I feel like, has a lot of scars, so to speak, about finishing runner-up, whether it's Jalen Brunson or whether it's Quentin Snyder committing and then pulling out last minute, or Cliff Alexander, or you name it. There have been some positives. I mean, remember, guys, Mark Smith, Craig, that got pretty hairy at the end, and he did pick Illinois. So I don't think it's just like all negative, but this is certainly a win for Brad Underwood and his staff, because you got the best player in the state, the Illinois Mr. Basketball winner, the two-time Gatorade Player of the Year, and there was some drama. But, hey, when you're recruiting top 50 players, there's going to be drama. I mean, it's just how this works, right? Yeah, just 1 year there.
Yeah, but the fact that he's from Peoria, where Illinois has had such a good relationship, strengthens the fact that Adam just continues that tradition. The Peoria pipeline, as people
Yeah, with Mark Smith in 17, and then, here, I guess it would have been the class of 18. But, that he's gotten 2 Mr. Basketballs, and that hasn't happened in a long time for Illinois.
Yeah, so Brad Underwood starting out really strong with this recruiting, and a lot of credit goes to his assistants. Shane Coleman has done really well in Chicago. Orlando Antigua has done really well in New York with Carmelo and Kofi, and they got a good staff there that really bringing in the guys that Illinois wants and building the program how they want in the right way. And I think, Craig, to go off that too, something that really stuck out to me in the press conference yesterday is that Brad Underwood said, he's like, now we're not so much filling scholarships as we are building relationships, which I think is like a very good point to make, because when you're first taking over a program, you're just trying to fill the spots, but now it's more of that relationship building, which is probably why he's, achieved, a top 20 recruiting class in the country.
Yeah, and that's just part of the process too, I think, right? I mean, I asked him specifically, Brad Underwood, about how much he's raised the floor of his program in recruiting, and I think that's an undeniable part of it. And the big question mark we had, Craig, when he was hired was, can he recruit? Because he hadn't done it really at a high major level just that 1 year at Oklahoma State, and he may have signed one class in there, but once again, you didn't have relationships at a high major level to sign multiple classes. And we saw it at Illinois that first year. I mean, look at those players where in that first class, a Greg Eboig-Bodine or Matisse Vasile, or the list goes on and on there about guys that they signed that are either no longer with, none of those guys are with the program, right? I mean, that didn't pan out here. And you even had it in a couple of classes after. And so I think the floor has certainly been raised where Illinois is a legit contender now in the Big Ten, and you have to give Brad and his staff credit for that.
Yeah, that first class in 2017 had Mark Smith, Greg Eboig-Bodine, Matisse Vasile, but then also Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams. So it was one of those classes where you just kind of see some guys, and you know that some of them are going to leave, but you hope that the guys that stay are able to lay that foundation, which Trent and DeMonte have now done. And in that 2018 class, it was a 7-person class, and right now Georgie's the only player left from that class. Now Io is in that class, but he's probably going to the NBA. So those first 2 classes, that's a full team right there, and only 3 players are still on the roster. So like Marlee said, and I agree, I like what Brad said and how he described it yesterday, was those first, especially that first class, you are filling a roster, and then once you get that, then you can develop your culture and develop your team, and that's where they're at now, and they're getting top 50 players on a regular basis. This is 3 years now in a row that they've had top 50, top 30 players, which is really, really impressive.
So, Craig, count that.
We talked about this a little bit last week, but the fact that Kofi and Io are leaving or potentially leaving could ultimately help them on the recruiting trail, in the sense that, hey, we're developing these players that are going to the draft, which I think that's ultimately every college kid's or every basketball player's dream. When you're a kid growing up playing basketball, like, you want to go to the NBA, and if Brad Underwood can position it like, hey, here at Illinois, we're developing these guys to go on to the next level, then I think that's going to definitely attract some top level players.
I want to get back to that in just a moment, Craig, or Marlee. But Craig, tell me this: you got that open right there. Trent Frazier was already coming here; he was already committed. So was DeMonte. So I'm not going to count those guys into Brad. He certainly had to keep them, and you got to give Brad credit for that. But I believe they were coming here no matter what. So if you just count those other guys in there, from what I remember you saying just a couple of minutes ago, there's nobody left that Brad and his staff recruited from those first 2 classes. Is that right? If you take out Trent and DeMonte.
Okay, so take out Trent DeMonte, Mark Smith is gone, Eboig-Bodine gone, Vasile gone. That was the 2017 class.
Yep, that's the first one.
2018 was Io, as of now gone. Tevian gone, Alvin Griffin gone, Samba Kane gone, Andres Felipe and Anthony Higgs gone, Georgie.
Okay.
28.
So you have to think that 3 of those guys panned out of how many? 11, 12? right? Because Io, Andres, and Georgie are their hits, right? So that hit rate for the first two classes is pretty low. I'm not going to say that's unusual because Brad said that, look, you can't develop relationships. I mean, you're just filling spots at that point. But that goes to show, to his point, that if they can keep some of these guys, and the talent is certainly upgraded big time, but if they can keep some of these guys around or promote them to the draft or whatever it may be, now all of a sudden you're building a culture and a program for the long term. And looking at it from a macro angle, I'm way more encouraged from what they're doing than from a micro of like, oh my gosh, what might happen if Io and Kofi both leave the world's ending Illinois basketball sucks again. I can't buy into that mindset that my phone, once Kofi declared and once Io declared is like, oh, Illinois is back to being terrible. Well, no. I mean, now it's just a matter of go get the next guy. I don't really buy into the mindset of, and Marlee, like you said, those things will help. Absolutely, that will help. I mean, Illinois is getting into some more recruiting battles that they wouldn't have been in under John Gross because Gross didn't win. You saw it the first couple of years with John when they made the tournament the first year and that propelled them, but that got stale pretty quick. And the fact that John was even in some of those battles with a Jalen Brunson or whatever a couple years after making the tournament, I think says a lot. But ultimately, he couldn't close the deal because those players wanted to see success. They wanted to see winning. And so I see it as a positive. Hey, if Kofi goes to the draft this year, that may hurt for this coming season, but I think it's only going to help long term. I mean, it's the chicken and the egg, right? Which comes first? How do you win without recruits, and how do you get recruits without winning? And I don't have the answer to that. That's the age-old question. But, Craig, where do you feel like in terms of a macro sense that Illinois is at right now in the recruiting?
Illinois needs to get some players in the NBA. They have one right now. The last player drafted from Illinois is Myers Leonard, 2013? 2012?
2012. Well, yeah, it would have been 2012. 2012. He's the last player drafted, but Kendrick Nunn's in the NBA. I mean, they have a couple of players in the NBA. It's just they haven't had a player drafted since 12, and that's an issue.
Yeah, so as much as it would hurt for Illini Nation and the fans to see Io or Kofi not come back, it would be good for the program to get them into the NBA, and they'll both be there eventually. Maybe some are thinking it's too soon now. They'll both be there, but yeah, they need them to go to the NBA. It might hurt the roster for next year. I think Kofi's more important to come back now than Io. I think you can't find another Kofi, and not that you can't find another Io, but you can fill Io's role easier than filling Kofi's role, a 7-foot, 300-pound kid. So they need Kofi to come back, but even if he doesn't, the program can survive. They just need to start showing recruits that they can get you to the NBA, and Io and Kofi need to start that maybe this year.
And I think that's where the Io commitment and Io coming here and then coming back for a second year really pays dividends for your program. I mean, when you look back at Brad Underwood's tenure 10 years from now, I think Io committing at the Jordan store a couple years ago in November and then coming back for a second year and cementing himself as, what he hopes to be an NBA draft pick, and then certainly moving on and leaving his legacy here, I think that will be the single most important part of Brad Underwood's tenure in terms of getting it off the ground, and that's where you just have to start stacking talent. You've got to start adding to it, and that's where Orlando Antigua and Shin Coleman have played huge roles in that, and Stephen Gentry, with going out and getting his first player for 2021 and really setting the bar for him, and Luke Goody, I think is important. But, for me, when I look back on this, ideally, if it all goes right for Underwood, that Io commitment and coming here and then coming back for another year, I think is going to be the single most turning point moment for Underwood. All right, let's continue on here. This is like the NFL draft last night where I got real awkward with Trey Wingo a couple of times. He's like, no, we don't have that. We're moving on. The power of technology, you just never know. This, non-face-to-face kind of thing. It's just it gets a little awkward sometimes. But we're making it here. What other takeaways did you guys have from Brad Underwood's time with the media on Zoom on Thursday? Not all at once here, guys.
I'm going back into the log and seeing what. I think it was interesting, just in the sense of Adam Miller coming to Illinois is going to kind of be compared to Io. He's almost no one wants to be that. No one wants to be the new Io. No one wants to be the new Kofi. And I think part of him coming to Illinois and wanting Io to essentially be gone is for him to essentially build his own legacy without feeling like he's going to be the new Io. I don't remember entirely what Brad Underwood said about that, but it was something along those lines, and that they do have their differences, but yet again he is going to be another one of those players that likely will impact the team and the league as a freshman.
Yeah, Jeremy Warner from 24/7 Sports asked Brad about, comparing the two players and how they're different. And they are different. I mean, Io is a slasher, get-to-the-bucket guy. I think Adam's a tremendous shooter, and I think he's going to really show that and help the shooting on this team, which was not good last year. And so that's where you hope that Trent comes back around, and with Carbello addition, you can get some more shooters and people around. Certainly losing Alan Griffin hurts that, your best three-point shooter last year. But, they're different players. They're going to be compared because they both played for Morgan Park, and they both had a shot to, win Mr. Basketball. I did not win that award. But, they're going to be compared forever. But they're way different players. And I think once Illini fans see Adam on the court, then they'll start to understand that they're different. Craig, what did you make of Adam saying that Io played no part in his decision to sign or come here?
If it wasn't that, I don't know what else delayed his signing. And I mean, from everything that I've heard from other people and everyone in the media seemed to think something was up. And it was the fact that he played so much with Io, he didn't want to share again. But it never made sense to me. Because like he said yesterday, they played together, so they've done it before. So unless there was some kind of beef between the two, I wasn't really sure why, but that's kind of the assumption that I made based on what everyone else said. So, I don't know. He can say what he says, and that's what we have to go with until someone else tells us different.
Right, and you got to take him for his word, right? If that's what he says, that's what he says. You can believe whatever you want into that. It made sense to me, though, that he wanted a chance to shoot the ball. He wanted a chance to have a role on this team, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think Io and Adam dislike each other. I think they're both in each other's court, and that's just part of sports, right? There's only so many shots that can be taken in a game. There's only so many people that can handle the ball. I don't think there's anything wrong with Adam coming out and saying, I want a role and a spot on this team where I know I can succeed. Now, maybe some people would view that as selfish or whatever else. I just view that as part of sports and recruiting. Like, you want a spot, and that's where I think Illinois is in a tough spot with Kofi, because how can they go sell a 5-man to a recruit if they don't know if Kofi's coming back? I mean, Marlee, do you want to go play on a college team if, there's another freshman outside or whatever that's right there that you're going to compete with? Now, every coach is going to promote competition, sure, but you want a chance to succeed, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I went to a program where they were in need of my position. Granted, things ended up changing because we had a coaching staff change and we got a couple transfers and all that. But you want to go somewhere where you're wanted, essentially. And I think that's just a big part of any kind of student making their college decision, and I think this is on a whole
And like I said, we'll have to take Adam's word because that's what he said, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. But my thoughts all along on this pinpointed to he wanted to see what Iowa was going to do, and he admitted that he sat back and watched Iowa this year, and I think that played a huge part in him wanting to come here. Is that Iowa showed that he can do it. Iowa was the front runner in terms of picking Illinois and staying home and trying to get Illinois back on the map, and Iowa's been the leader in that all along. And if Iowa doesn't succeed or has a different course of action here, or if he leaves after last year, I don't know if Adam feels the same way. And that's why I think that Iowa commitment and coming back was so important, at least for the short term and maybe the long term of getting Illinois basketball back on the right track. All right, let's talk some IHSA now. And they announced on Tuesday that all spring sport tournaments are now canceled. And it only makes sense to me that the rest of the seasons are going to be gone, as well as Governor Pritzker announced that the stay-at-home order now goes through the end of May. And so, look, we're still holding out hope here, I guess, that they can maybe go play a game or maybe get some kind of practice in or senior night or whatever it may be. But, what was your guys' reaction to the IHSA's announcement waiting until Tuesday and then the inevitable that, hey, this is not going to work this year?
Yeah, I think it was a long time coming. I think it's the decision that we all expected, but they did say that there was the opportunity of schools allowing a couple games or hosting a couple things, just a limited amount. But I think not that that's irresponsible on the IHSA's part, but I think it just gives false hope, because we've already seen so many schools just say outright, we're not going to allow any games for the rest of the year. And I think that's just important for closure. Whether, I don't know, I just don't think it's fair to say, okay, yes, like maybe we'll allow a couple games if it's safe, when in reality I think we all know that that's really not going to be a possibility, especially with this stay-at-home order pushed until the end of May. I think it would have just been so much better for the IHSA to say, hey, the state tournaments are canceled, no more games the rest of the year, rip the Band-Aid off, and then if the schools want to organize something to honor the seniors, like a parade or a ceremony or something, or just kind of a symbolic game, if it's safe, that's fine. But I just think, I don't know, they should have just ripped off the Band-Aid altogether. Yeah, this has been what we've expected for 4 weeks, 3 weeks now. We've talked about it on every podcast. This is what was going to happen, but it doesn't suck any less. Like I've said before, those NCAA athletes, the NCAA can grant them their extra year of eligibility if they want it, but that can't happen with these IHSA kids. And I know we've talked to a lot of kids that were expecting to make some noise in the postseason, especially in their senior year, and they're heartbroken. And some of them are going to play college, so their careers aren't done. But for those that aren't going to go play their sport in college, this really, really has to hurt. I mean, because some of them might have played a spring game, but most of them, their season ended without them even knowing at the time, because they were holding out hope. So I feel for all of them. I understand completely how the IHSA handled it. It might seem on the surface that they were just delaying the inevitable, which they were. Like, I don't think anyone really thought they were going to play, but I think they handled it well, as they're just delaying until the last possible moment. Because what if next week or in 3 weeks from now we find out that everything's good to go, and then they can continue, and they can't have their postseason, and then they're like, well, we've already canceled everything. We made a too early decision. So I understand why they were doing it. It didn't seem like it was the right decision, and a lot of people probably don't think it's the right way to handle it, but I understood how they.
Yeah, and I think there's understanding there for sure, Craig. I also commend Unit 4 in Tuscola for having some leadership and just saying, look, guys, like, this is it. We're not going to do anything else. Everything's been canceled from a national perspective and an international perspective. It's just not worth it, And so Unit 4 in Tuscola, and I'm sure a couple other schools as well around our area just said, yeah, you know what? We're just ripping this thing off, and it's going to be done, and we're not going to even provide any more hope in that sense. And I get that as well. That's a realistic part of life sometimes, is that it doesn't go the way you think it is going to go, or planned, or the way it should go. But at least in my eyes, for those schools, at those players at those schools, they just ripped it off and said, look, sorry. I mean, it's just not worth it. And I think for me, Craig, while I agree with you in part, the numbers have shown in the curve that this is not going to just go away. Like, we're not at 20 deaths a day in our state. We're adding 2,000 cases a day. Just the numbers to me and the science don't show. And I'm not trying to be an expert here by any means, but when there's 1,500 to 2,500 new cases every single day, the reality of that to me just is not going to happen. What'd you make, Craig, of those schools just coming out and saying, yeah, this is, we don't care what the IHSA says, this is going to be it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and I'm not sure what to make of why the IHSA even said that. I feel like if you just like kind of like Marlee said, just rip the Band-Aid off. Just cancel it all. Like, to leave it open-ended is giving the kids maybe a sense of false hope, because, like you said, the numbers aren't improving. So I mean, if the Olympics are canceled here this summer, how can anything else happen? I mean, that's a worldwide event. So yeah, I agree with Tuscola Unit 4. I don't think they would have been put in that situation to have to decide if they were going to play. But good call for Champaign and Tuscola.
Yeah.
I think too, like, I understand totally with IHSA needing to cancel, the state tournament, because there's obviously a lot of, logistics that would go into that, and a lot of money and whatever, and staffing and whatever it might be for it. But then to leave it open-ended and saying, okay, yeah, but you can play a couple games, maybe, is like, yeah, it's like this false hope. I would so much rather than come out and say, okay, yes, the season is canceled, and then let's say in a couple months, we're able to go and socialize again and gather in larger groups. Then how hard is it for, Central and Centennial to be like, hey, let's hold a symbolic game to honor our seniors? I feel like just to cut it off and say, okay, the season's canceled, and then to have something after if it's safe. But just like holding out and waiting, and like at some point it's gonna be too long to wait for some of these kids, and you're gonna want to move on and get closure and end your high school career and just close that chapter in the book. So the waiting game is, I think, just what bothers me about it.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because proms are canceled, graduation parties are canceled. I mean, I think back to graduating high school or college or whatever it may be, and it's such a celebratory part of life. Those are moments that you're truly never going to forget, and when you can look back and reflect and be really happy or proud or whatever it may be of your career and life to that point. And all those things are on hold, but at some point you can't hold them anymore. The moment has passed. We only get a short window of opportunity and moments in our life, and once they're gone, they're gone. And I feel terrible for that, but the reality is it's just where we're at in our world right now, and it's, man, I mean, the list just goes on, right? It's more than prom. It's more than just a graduation ceremony. It's the parties. It's the hanging out with friends for the last time. I think of high school and like how truly monumental those few moments were, or weeks, or the last summer before college starts. And even if you had close friends that stayed around and went to community college or whatever it may be, you truly go your separate ways. I mean, everyone starts life anew, so to speak, once you graduate high school. And those moments and time and the friendships you had and the experiences, and good and bad, right? I mean, I feel like it's almost starting a fresh slate, so to speak. And so I feel terrible for those kids. I mean, it's so much more than athletics, and it's just a tough spot to be in. But that's part of the reason too I wanted to start our senior send-off moment here and segment on WCIA. And everyone has these across the country. I mean, Scott Van Pelt, I felt, did a great job with his senior night stuff, and giving our athletes a chance to be seen. And it's some athletes too that maybe normally wouldn't have been seen or on those stages, and so we've really enjoyed that, and I'm putting those together. We got 100+ pictures just in the first night we opened it up to people, and we'll continue to ask to send pictures in, and we're going to do that over the next 4 to 6 weeks, as May wraps up and we get into June, But I really just wanted to honor those kids, and especially the ones that maybe would have been just a role player on a team like Tuscola. We all know about Logan Tabling and Lucas Krazine and, the Tuscola kids, Mitch Hemman and Mitch Hardick and all those kind of guys. But there's so many more players out there that maybe don't get those moments or that opportunity. So for me, I really wanted to shine a light on them for that.
Absolutely, and they deserve it. And I hope, this situation doesn't extend too far into the summer to where they'll be able to have some kind of symbolic or ceremony or something, because those are the moments that you live for, your senior night or whatever it might be, graduation, and I hope, there's some kind of celebration that they'll be able to have, just if they're an athlete or a high school student or something that they just get, because I think being a high school student in this whole situation might be just about the worst, because I don't know, I think us as adults, we're not really losing a whole lot except for our day-to-day things, but this is such an important time in your life, and everyone remembers your high school graduation and your last, football game or volleyball game, whatever it may be. So it's heartbreaking.
Right, and being on TV for – go ahead, Craig.
There are times where, we cover a lot of stuff in this job, from college to high school, and there are sometimes those days where you're like, man, I don't want to go to this school at 3:30 for this high school baseball or softball game, or I don't want to spend 8 hours at Eastern Illinois covering the track state finals. I don't think any of us are going to take those days for granted anymore. I think all three of us would give anything to be able to be out there. As much as maybe we didn't want to in the past, I think anybody in sports media that covers high school sports is not going to think that anymore after this, after missing out on a full spring schedule. It's fun getting out there and seeing those high school kids. So we're looking forward to getting back out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, and for me, it's just been a little bit of self-reflection of how busy we are in May and how different this May is going to look, because May's probably our second or third busiest month, in this business, because you have so much going on in a short amount of time. November is definitely the busiest month of the year, but May's up there, pretty high, especially the last couple of weeks of May with state track for boys and girls, baseball and softball regionals, girls soccer, Illinois baseball and softball in the postseason wrapping up there. Regular season, and then getting into tournament play, Big Ten and NCAAs, and then you've got men's golf as well at Illinois. So there's a ton going on in a short amount of time, and I think I'm going to miss that busy, because for me, and I don't know how you guys feel, but for me, I like being busy. It means there's content. It means there's good stuff going on. It's fun to cover. It's fun to bring that to our audience of the state track meet. And Craig, you're right. While it may seem monotonous, or it's really hot in Charleston on the track or whatever it may be, like those are the moments that I take a lot of pride in this job, because we're bringing content to our audience, and those are memories that those kids are going to have for a lifetime. So I don't know. How have you guys felt about just the
I always say, I would so much rather be busy than bored, and right now I'm kind of just trying to keep busy. So I'm on the same page. I like to be up and at it and running from one game to another, and it makes the days go by, and it's fun and exciting, especially during the postseason time, and getting to cover those events. I know, Craig, like you said, sometimes it's like a drag if we have to
Yeah, and those are things that it's going to look a lot different this May, and I think those last couple of weeks of May when we would have state track or whatever it have been, and state track's certainly not my favorite. I don't know how you guys feel because it's usually hot or raining or a combination of the two, or there's delays or whatever it may be, or the deadlines are an issue. But I'm going to miss that, I'm going to miss the busyness of what May always brings. And then on top of that, when the calendar flips and we get past basketball and it starts to get nice outside and whatever else, just that kind of excitement again of, hey, we had to push towards, basketball and NCAA tournament. What's that for Illinois, right? What it would have been for this year and the excitement of that Big Ten tournament and then, making the big dance and all of that. And then for me, April's kind of slow, but then we get into this May and it's like, oh, yeah, here we go again. Like the last push before summertime and where – we all take our vacations, and it kind of really slows down in the sports department. But it's just a weird time in that sense, and I'm already kind of dreading that downtime. I'm dreading that missing it of like, well, okay, well, it's just another feature story today or whatever else. And I don't mean that in a negative way of like, oh, we're just telling another story. You know what I mean? But like just the highlight-driven busyness of what we do is going to be weird. But it's in the times that we are, and we'll be here to cover it the best that we can and continue to hopefully tell some compelling stories along the way of people that, are trying to deal with this and how they're keeping sports in their life and the stories that, maybe we should have been telling during state track, state baseball, Illinois softball, you name it, down the list. So, guys, it's a crazy world we live in right now, and we're all trying to figure out a new normal. And as we settle into what this normal is looking like and what it's been for the last 6 weeks, I just hope that everyone continues to stay well and do their part to flatten this curve so we can get back to normal as quick as possible. And hopefully we can get college football back this fall, and maybe Major League Baseball comes back this year. I don't know. I mean, any final thoughts, guys, as we wrap up here about where we're at and where we're headed? I'd love to see golf come back and the players have to carry their own bag. That'd be. I hate that in college golf where you're a college athlete and you have a push cart. That drives me nuts. What is that? I don't know. Whatever. I hope the golf courses. Now, that I'd be all right with. What?
I got a cart, yeah, it was great.
How did that happen? Craig, have you ever got a cart at state golf?
Oh, yeah.
Man, apparently I have no finesse. I am completely missing out on this. Hey, I see what you did there. I see what you did. Actually, I literally am dripping. I cut myself shaving today, and it's not stopped bleeding for like 3 hours. I may have a problem. I'm not really sure. I don't know if you can tell on the Zoom here, Craig, but, there you go. It's not a bad place to be. But I'm going to go tend to my lip here before the newscast. Hopefully I'm not dripping blood all over the desk here for you, leaving it for you tomorrow, Craig. But, it's all good. All right, that's going to do it here. You guys got anything else? Silence. The sounds of silence. The sounds of tears rolling down our eyes because there are no sports. Stay safe. I like it. All right, that's all I got, guys. Thanks for jumping on here in your apartments. For Craig Choate, Marlee Wierda, I'm Bret Beherns here in the studio. We'll do it again next week, except I won't be here. I'm going to be on vacation. Craig and Marlee, they'll hold it down next Friday on the 3-in-1 podcast. Thanks for listening. Be safe. Be well.